to the current situation, a number of things are interrelated. You have, for example, in India, you have an election with a new leader. Now, who knows what's going to happen, but supposedly among the Indian population of India, they see good things. This guy's supposed to be a moral person, not, corruption all over the place. And they have figured that within about 5 years, you should start to see some real progress in terms of India. Well, yeah, you will. And that's all part of this plan because it's sort of a techno-feudal. That's my third book ago, not my current book, not the Secret Nazi Plan, but the one before that, The New World Order, the rise of techno-feudalism. That is the typical of this. China and India are typical examples. Israel, to a certain extent, is becoming that way. California also, to a certain extent, becoming that way. Because in the U.S., California sort of leads the way in terms of our future disasters that we're going through. And so this is what's happening, and India is supposed to be. It is planned that they become stronger and stronger, like China has become stronger and stronger and stronger. However, remember, they have both of them been suckered into this global economic system, and that's what the power elite wants to do. Where, they wanted to get the Bank of England started so they could get Britain in debt, so they would have the British Empire, but they would have them in debt. So even though it's an empire, it's in debt to these power brokers, as power elite as I call them. So that's what they want to do with India and China. They build them up, build them up, build them up. India's going to start to have a sort of a middle class income, like that. But they've gotten into this global economic system, which, if you look at it seriously, is the vehicle for undercutting, knocking the legs out of everybody. So they suckered India into this, they've suckered China into this, and they'll build them up. Yeah, they will. They'll build them up like our stock market. Our stock market is very, very high, unusually high, irresponsibly high. There usually has been a, quote, correction by now. There hasn't even been a correction in the market. So when it's going to tumble in about a year or so, it's really going to tumble, and the plunge protection team is not going to be able to save it. I mean, they're going to try, but they won't. It'll be a big disaster by 2016 when Jeb Bush is elected and all this sort of stuff. So anyway, that's what's going to happen in India. Now, in Egypt, it's something a little different. Notice how the media doesn't pay attention. They pay a lot of attention to Boko Haram, right? Then for the last few days, you haven't heard anything about Boko Haram. How about those girls? The Nigerian leader, military, yeah, we know where they are, and American forces over there helping them. Nothing in the news. So it's on to something else. Let's move along here. Well, the same thing with al-Sisi, the general in Egypt. They outlawed through his, puppet courts. The courts in Sisi cooperate. He's military. Basically, it was a military coup. And now they tried to dress this up in the Democratic election. The problem is it's really illegitimate. Only about 48% of the population showed up. The Muslim Brotherhood called for a boycott, so it's really not legitimate. You say, well, what about those young people, the idealists? Well, they've been sort of shut out too. He hasn't fulfilled his promises to the secularists either. He hasn't really, implemented a great plan to energize the economy. No, he hasn't done that. Why? Well, he's a military guy, and military guys, especially generals of Egypt, they are sort of hand-picked by us, sort of like Gaddafi was handpicked by us. Saddam Hussein was handpicked by us. We basically handpick the generals of Egypt, and we fund them, right? So we give them tons of money, not just for the country, but their own personal use. So they basically do what we say. And so we said crack down on the Muslim Brotherhood and so forth, and we'll pick up with that after the break. But the election seems to be more and more illegitimate, even though they allowed the polls to be open 3 days, trying to get people to vote. And so al-Sisi is, moving ahead, but he's not doing too well, and pretty soon he'll be right back there in the old Hosni Mubarak.
Hold that thought. We'll be back in a moment.
While the storm clouds gather.
Okay, well, this is Dr. Stan. I guess it's Dr. Cuddy. We're talking about what's going on in Egypt as we replace one dictator with another. Behind the scenes is always the same hand, of the invisible hand of the people who really rule the world, having nothing to do with Egypt at all. Egypt, as with so many other countries, is simply manipulated by those within what I call the Brotherhood. Go right ahead.
The difference is this time, though, Hosni Mubarak was a dictator, but the military at the time was sort of bought by us. And, we had this nice arrangement. We give you a ton of money, and you'll do what we say. And so they did. And so Mubarak went because the general populace, the secularists, the young people, the unemployed, the Muslim Brotherhood all said this is not going well. We got this unemployment and corruption and graft and all that sort of thing. The difference there, though, is this is a military dictatorship. In this case, al-Sisi is a general. So it's not really likely that you'll have the same sort of, quote, revolution that you did before, because about 1,000 members of the Muslim Brotherhood have been killed. Bang, you're dead. And everybody has gotten the message that you, too, even the media, the sycophantic media, oh, yes, General Sisi, you're so wonderful. Oh, yes, whatever you say, sir, yes, yes, yes. Because it's different. Yeah, he's a dictator, and Mubarak was a dictator. But in this case, the dictatorship is of the leader of the military, and he's got the tanks. He's got the old Tiananmen Square tanks like the Chinese did. And so, like in Tiananmen Square, yes, the Statue of Liberty and crepe paper, whatever the thing was made of, and they let them run around doing their thing for a few days, and then they basically squish them, and there's lots of blood all over the place. Well, the media isn't paying attention to it. And it's done a little more secretly in Egypt, but you still got lots of people being slaughtered or put in jail or said, we'll execute you and so on. Now, there's an assistant manager of this grocery store that I go to here. And he's from Egypt, and he's a bright fellow. He's the assistant manager of the grocery store, but he was a nuclear engineering major at the university, just decided he might, like grocery store managing better. And he said, well, those people really, there's 600 or so, they're not going to be executed. I said, yeah, I know they're not. I said, I know. About 35 or so will probably be executed, and most of the rest of them will be let loose. But I said, but don't you understand? He looked at me sort of quizzically, like like most people, he doesn't understand the game. It's a game. I said, look, it's like in Congress, where if you want a bridge for $5 million in Sacramento or wherever, you ask for $10 million. And then the other side says, oh, no, this is a wasteful weekend, blah, blah, blah. And then you say, okay, let's compromise. Let's compromise. We'll settle for $5 million, which is what you wanted all along. So what happens is the game is you arrest tons of people, you have this show trial, and you have your flunky judge say, I sentence you to the death penalty, you 650. Some of the people didn't even know they'd been charged, with committing a capital crime. I sentence you, and then all of a sudden you find out, oh, well, you can appeal to the leading mullah and so forth, and you won't be executed. And everybody says, oh, isn't he wonderful? Oh, General al-Sisi, you're so forgiving. It's like the Korean communists. They used to get these American prisoners. There's the Korean, South Korean prisoners, and they put them in jail, and they beat them, beat them all over the place. And then they'd be real nice to them. They turn around, here's some food, and the guy will say, oh, thank you, you torturers who put me here in the first place and beat the living daylights out of me. Thank you for the. So it's that sort of game,
Hold that thought. We'll be back in just a moment with Dr. Dennis Cuddy. Well, Dr. Cuddy is certainly talking about what's going on in Egypt now. We replaced one dictatorship with another, but this is the military dictatorship. And basically, they're going to kill, it looks like, about 1,000 members of the Muslim Brotherhood, or 600, 1,000 members of the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, remember, here's a country of 50, 60 million people. There are not many members of the Muslim Brotherhood there. But basically, we created the Muslim Brotherhood. We financed the Muslim Brotherhood, a controlled opposition. And now the man we are financing is going to kill the opposition. This is how the system really works throughout the world, and the average individual cannot believe anything so diabolical, but this is the reality of what's going on. Dr. Dennis Cuddy, go right ahead.
Okay, roughly 1,000 members of the Muslim Brotherhood have already been killed, as in, bang, you're dead. The other 600 and so forth were arrested. Some of them didn't even know they'd been charged with a crime, and they've been arrested and tried and so forth and so on. So there's two different figures there. All right, so in Egypt, they're doing what we told them to. What we actually should be doing is saying, look, this is a military coup. We have a federal law that says we should no longer provide military aid support to such a coup, but we're doing it. Now, how are we doing it? Well, it's easily. You distract. You have another crisis somewhere. oh, look, Bergdahl. We got another crisis. So the media drops Egypt or drops Boko Haram in Nigeria or drops the Ukraine, whatever, and they go charge, like a group of a pack of dogs, woo, 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 and you go chasing after one thing, and then you send loose this raccoon or possum or something like that. And they change direction, woo, woo, they go after the other one. You dangle these little things in front of them, different directions, and they go flocking off here and forget about the other thing, right? That's the idea. That's the game they play. Okay, so that's India and Egypt. So now if you look at Europe and everything, say, oh, look at the stock market. Everything's fine. The housing industry, everything's okay. Well, if you actually take a really close look at Europe, what they've done is entered into basically uncharted territory. And, you, the listener, probably haven't heard this. Not many of some of you probably have. But Europe is actually, most of them taking the extraordinary step of going into negative interest rates. It's not just 0.00001%. They've gone into negative interest rates. Why? Because the economies there are like teetering. They're on the brink, and you have, like in Spain, for example, 30% unemployment. Well, a nation can't sustain 30% unemployment and not have bad things start to happen, right? So Europe is a lot more fragile than they're willing to admit. This is a really major step that they've gone into negative interest rates. And so what you'll have is there'll be a descent there. Certain countries, Greece and Spain, all will lead the descent first. Germany will probably be, last in this descent. But everybody, they're so interconnected. See, that's the problem with this interconnectedness. The interconnectedness of the nations within the EU, the interconnectedness of us with Mexico, and NAFTA and all this and global interconnectedness is what's going to destroy us. And that's part of the plan. I mean, the power elite knows what they're doing. They know how to bring entire continents down and begging for mercy and so on. All right, so the next major thing is, of course, is Sergeant Bergdahl. And I think he got his promotion after he had been, basically left his outfit and gone over to the Taliban. Hey, let's make this guy a sergeant. So anyway, I think, and this is one of those situations with Bergdahl, where you have to at least ask questions. Now, it may be that things are playing out exactly as they really are. It may be. But you always have to be a little bit suspicious. It's sort of the old Manchurian Candidate situation or scenario. It's sort of like the Tim McVeigh situation. Remember Tim McVeigh? He just sort of leaves the Army and gets a nice security clearance job up in the Northeast. I mean, well, how do you do that?
He deserted from the Army, and then he gets another government job.
Yeah.
Because he's always working for government, and of course he was the fellow who brought down suddenly the building there in Oklahoma. Basically, that was a government operation. Just exactly taking down the Twin Towers and Building 7. This was a government operation. They killed 3,000 people because they had to have an excuse to get us into a war with Afghanistan. And all you need to do is watch Building 7 come down. You can see it on the internet. It's a controlled demolition. Building 7 is a controlled demolition. They killed 3,000 American citizens so they could get us into this no-win war in Afghanistan. We've been fighting there since 2001, and nothing has been accomplished other than a lot of people killed. Our guest is Dr. Dennis Cuddy. And, of course, we'll be back here in just a moment or two as we evaluate what's going on. But, ladies and gentlemen, reality is usually scoffed at. Illusion is usually king. A small group of evil people control both political parties, controls the media, and if you doubt that, you need to get the book, The New Media Monopoly, and they largely determine what the average American reads, hears, sees, and ultimately what he believes.